Again, we're very lucky to have as a panel imagining a new future in our communities. So we're going to give each person about roughly 10 minutes, and then we'll have a chance for some questions, discussion. You know, what are you hearing? What's exciting? What do you want to know more about? And we'll also probably have a handout that we will print in the next break and give to you. So does anybody particularly want to go first? Any brave souls? Okay.
I'm Mari Quint from Emmanuel Monastery in Lutherville, Maryland. And next to me is Regemer, also from Emmanuel Monastery. We're very used to co-facilitating. Virginia is going to describe a program that we have been co-facilitating. So we decided, since we were asked individually, and we're from the same monastery, that we would just share the richness of oblate life in Baltimore. Kathy told you yesterday that 23 sisters from Elizabeth came to Maryland in 1971. They had oblates almost from the beginning. Today, there are 13 sisters, 22 oblates, 11 candidates, although 2 of them are kind of permanent candidates. They've been coming to oblate meetings for many years, but have never made the process formal. We also have 2 oblates from other monasteries who are much closer to us and who come to our meetings. A program that the sisters began many years ago called Pacem is a different kind of relationship. It's a one-on-one relationship between a sister and a person who may not feel comfortable in a group setting, sharing in a group setting. We meet monthly as one community. We live in Pennsylvania and Maryland and Virginia. So there are about 8 of us who are close enough to the monastery so that we participate, Virginia and I, weekly or more, and there are a couple of others who are there every week. There are others who come only to the oblate meetings. We have an annual retreat day with an outside presenter. We're in the 3rd year of leadership by a team, a sister and 3 oblates. This year we're talking about a rotation of the team leadership. They told us at the first meeting that we would probably be going through this, but they haven't given us the details on it yet. So the leadership team sets a theme for the year. Interestingly enough, the theme for this year is our life as oblates. I think Virginia and I are going to be talking about what we have learned from this wonderful week when we get back. We've studied the Psalms using Irene Knowles' wonderful book with pleading, cursing, praising, conversing with God through the Psalms. We looked at the Rule of Benedict for the last 2 years using Joan Chittister's Monastery of the Heart. Programs are presented by oblates. Unless we're doing Liturgy of the Hours, when Kathy is called in as the resident expert in Liturgy of the Hours, but almost everything is presented by oblates within the framework that the leadership has set out for us. The sisters involve oblates in many aspects of their lives. All monastery programs are now co-facilitated with 1 or more oblates. We have an oblate who leads a program at the monastery. We have an oblate who's a spiritual director who uses space in the monastery because she's retired and she doesn't have a proper space for that wonderful ministry. Oblates are part of the procession at all public events, jubilees, final profession, and funerals. Virginia was invited to meet with the visitators the last time that the community had visitation, and I participated in a panel called Conversation Circle as the community was doing its direction setting for its last chapter. There were 7 of us: a priest, the development director, 2 sisters from other communities who were very much involved with the life of the monastery, and 3 oblates, one of whom was a listener. We spoke for 5 minutes from our personal knowledge and experience of the community and the needs of our times on 2 questions. Where do you see potential and possibilities for us, the community of Emmanuel Monastery? Where could we, should we, put our energies? This was a very moving experience, I think, for everyone on the panel and for the sisters as well. So, why do people want to be oblates?
That's an interesting beginning because I didn't want to be an oblate. For years, I did not want to be an oblate. I went to the monastery. I got to know them because of a peace and justice organization that I worked for and they were part of. And I became aware of their prayers, so I joined them for prayer. I went to liturgy. I was invited to be an oblate. But I had an experience with another community, and I didn't want to, not Benedictine, did not want to be an oblate. So I got to know them better with a program that I'm now part of, but I attended, called Holy Living, Living Holy. The second holy is W-H-O-L-L-Y. And we looked at the Rule of Benedict for the 21st century. I'm only going to talk a little bit about that program, but chapter 24 of the book talked about the degrees of excommunication. And this got my attention. This topic came up a couple years after I'd been. When we arrived, if you can imagine, well, first of all, we have a very small chapel. We're about a quarter of this room, and that's our chapel. And that's where we meet. It's also our meeting place. But we were facing the wall. Each one of us faced the wall. What did you think? And I said, Benedict just fell off his pedestal. I didn't think much of it. It seems to me if you're grumbling about things, it's because you've got some issues and somebody needs to help you, but complaining, it's just part of what it is. So anyway, I didn't think much of that. So, but when she talked about grumbling was the biggest reason, I sort of looked at myself and I thought, I'm a So maybe I should think of this. And, grumbling, it's not good for a marriage. It's not good for a community. It's not really good for family or friendships or just about anything. So I began to look at the rule differently, and I looked at it as practical. It wasn't a spiritual way of living, it was a practical way of living, and I always look at the rule that way. It's not like the rules of other communities that say, you must say the rosary every day, you must do the Stations of the Cross every day, you must read from the Bible every day. To me, the rule is very practical. There is prayer in it, and there's a whole chapter on how to pray and when to pray, but it's just much more practical. Don't know where I am again. Let's see. So when you think about in the future and bringing Oblates into the future, I think sometimes it may be good to look at the practical part of living. And what does that look like, and how does that bring spirituality to you rather than the other way around? I put this in here, so I'm going to read it. I remember many years ago, I wanted to purchase Joan Chittister's commentary on the rule for the entire U.S. House, the Senate, and the President. And that was long before our current President. So it's just, there's a way of living, and it's in that rule. And of course, the commentary helps. So, in spreading the spirit of Benedict, it's important to remember that we're inviting people into the school of God's service. I can remember my spiritual director, who was Benedictine, said, you need to go back to school. So I went back to that chapter on the school of God's service. And the rule tells us to welcome a guest with a bow of the head or a complete prostration of the body, because Christ is present in the stranger. So how do we do that today? We're not going to prostrate ourselves when somebody comes to the door. And when we arrived here Sunday night, it was midnight, and Sister Teresa welcomed us as Christ. She didn't prostrate herself on the floor, but she welcomed us, and she cared for all of our needs. And that's being very practical at midnight. Another of my favorite rules is that of the cellarer. And that position in the monastery could be used with, you have a lot of power when you're in charge of the supplies and everything. So you could have the attitude of, I'm in charge, I have the power to make or break your day, but it's not a very good attitude towards the rule. So a couple years ago when I was in school, and I got my bachelor's when I was 46 years old, I think, I took a class on women as mentors. And the faculty member, she held up her hand. She said there are two ways to work with other people. And if you look at your hand like this, there's somebody at the top and there are people at the bottom. And that's a power over. But if you just turn your hand a little bit, it's a power with. And I've always remembered that. And I don't remember a lot of things I learned in school, but I've always remembered that. It's a power with. So I think that the monastery is a place where we share power, especially today. Maybe not in the beginning, but we share the day. And so the cellarer needs to do this, so that she's or he is not in control and using that power that they have. Another thing is let's see. The things in the monastery need to be shared. You have what you need. And we don't find that in families today, in communities today. If you have a nice car next door, I want a nice car. If you do this, I want to do that. But Benedict talks about people having what they need. So if you have a person in music ministry, they might need a piano. In our community, they have drums. And if you're the person who cleans the monastery, you need a good broom, you need a vacuum cleaner, but you don't need that much. And so, to me, that goes back to the practical thing. Let's see. One more thing about the creative strip, but when I was learning about being an oblate, is inviting others to be an oblate. And when you're talking to others about being a Val Benedictine or an oblate, practice the phrase, listen with the ear of your heart. That's just my favorite phrase, besides the power. And I think that's, if we listen to other people, and then we'll have openings to other people, to invite them to be oblates when it's a good time. But listening is a good, important way to do that. So I'm going to turn this over.
When we were talking about last night making our lists, my first hope was the Rule of Benedict, for the reasons that Virginia has talked about and for many others. My favorite words about the rule are balance and hospitality. The first day that I came to the monastery, I was coming for spiritual direction. I'd never been in a monastery before. I was told to enter the door to the chapel and sit and wait. And as I was sitting, I heard sounds. They were kitchen sounds. There was laughter, there was the sound of water. There were plates being moved around. It was about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and some of the sisters were in the kitchen just finishing up lunch. The building is not at all like this monastery or any of the other monasteries I've been in. It's an old farmhouse that looks like the house that my best friend in elementary school lived in. When you drive down the driveway, there's an addition that the sisters built on, but it's small. And the kitchen is a very important part of the monastery. So I kind of felt at home in a most unexpected way. Those of us who frequently come to the monastery, oblates and many others, talk about the feeling of peace that we have as we come into the driveway. Many of our oblates actually first came to the monastery to participate in programs. It's not only, however, adults who have a feeling about the monastery. My oldest granddaughter is 6. They live in New Jersey, and she visits 2 or 3 times a year. And she walks in the door and says, "Okay, Grandmari, when are we going to see the sisters?" And on New Year's Day of 2001, the community embarked on an adventure in hospitality. And Kathy, you tell the story better than anybody.
because I answered the phone. It was 2010, actually.
I'm sorry.
It was 2010. It was December 30th, 2010. And we got a phone call from it was from our development director, who had gotten a phone call from the United Way. Let me preface this by saying we're Emmanuel Monastery. That plays a role in this. And Molly, our development director, said, Sister Kathy, I don't know how many of you are home, but we have this woman who just came from Afghanistan seeking asylum. And she really needs a place to stay. We took her to the asylum seekers home in Baltimore, and there was no room. It's full. And oh, by the way, she's 8 months pregnant.
Oh.
So, here we were, Emmanuel Monastery. There's no room in the inn. There's a pregnant woman who needs a place to sleep. It did not take long to contact the rest of the sisters. We had already been through a process as a community to become a safe house for trafficked victims, so we knew that the sisters were open to something like that. So we called back and said, sure. And they said, okay, well, we found a place for one night, so we'll bring her New Year's Day. Fine. In the meantime, I remember that line from Gone with the Wind. I don't know nothing about birth and babies. And neither did anybody else. So I called a friend who was a Sister of Mercy at Mercy Hospital, and we worked all of that out. Should we need to have a hospital or a doctor? So Sarah arrived on New Year's Day. It is now 2011. And she was in her late 20s. She did speak some English, and she looked scared out of her wits. She was a young Muslim woman. The one thing she asked Molly, who brought her, is, are these Muslim women? And she said, no, they're Catholic sisters. And you could see the fear in her face. So she came in, we greeted her very warmly and showed her her room, and she said she was very tired, so we let her have some space and some rest. And it came to dinner time, and she didn't show up, so we thought we'd better check and make sure she was okay. So one of our sisters went down and knocked lightly on the door, and there was no answer, so she knocked again and opened it slightly. And Sarah had brought her prayer rug. She brought very little in her suitcase, but she brought her prayer rug, and she brought her, I don't know the correct word for it, but what she wears when she prays. And she was praying. And Tricia, who had gone to the door as Sarah came out, said, you know, you could take your prayer rug into the chapel. That would be fine. And Sarah had told us later, that was the moment she knew it was okay. And that was good that we got that icebreaker finished with, because guess who went into labor that same night? It was false labor. She did not have the baby that night, but we got her to the hospital, got her all checked out, and everything was fine, and they told us not to worry, it could be another 2-3 weeks. It's now January 2nd. On January 6th, we all know the Feast of Epiphany, January 6th, Sarah gave birth to a son. His name was Amin. And Amin and Sarah lived with us there was just no conversation about who was going to go where. They were going to stay with us for as long as need be, and then some. So for 2.5 years, Sarah and Amin lived with us while she worked at getting reconnected with her husband, got some schooling. She's been in school. She's going to get her degree at the end of this year. Her husband has since come over. They have another little girl. They live 15 minutes away from us. And the agreement was, yes, you can move out, but we get Amin at least once a week. So that's the story. But the story has a lot more to it, because it is the beginning. Well, first of all, it absolutely changed our community and our Oblates, and opened us up, all of us up, and formed an organization. Maura, you can talk about that, yes? No, you can. And we all got involved, let's put it that way, not just helping this woman, but helping immigrants, asylum seekers, refugees, families. We've had a lot of connection with all of this. Interfaith relationships. It just goes beyond, and it changed all of us so much. It was a risk we took, but we didn't have a lot of time to worry about, and it turned out to be the greatest gift we ever had. So,
Wow.
and when we had that poem this morning to begin the day, if you want, the Virgin will come walking down the street.
Oh, wow.
Well, the organization ALL stands for Asylee Women Enterprises. And it's an awesome place. And somebody says, people like to complain about the refugees coming to this country. And there's a quote on their website that says, they did not come to escape, they came to find a better life, to save their lives, because a lot of them are in danger. And not only did this help the women who came, but it's done by 8 different women religious communities that are in Baltimore. And all 8 make this work. They have, many of our oblates are volunteers there. Many people from other communities are also volunteers there. Everybody except the staff is a volunteer. I drive. There are clinics in the city, and these women mostly need medical help for different reasons. So I like it because I drive with them one-on-one. They ask us not to ask them questions, which is really hard. But the only way you get to know people is to really ask them questions. So it is hard, but every time they tell their story, it creates, the pain is still there. I said, we're running out of time. There was one thing I wanted to say. I'll think about it later. Just lost where I was going. Okay. It's an awesome place.
We've used up all our time. Okay.
Oh, good. All I was going to say is that's a really hard story to follow. Do you want to go out and pass those out? Thank you. Hi, I'm Mary Hoddy. I am from Holy Wisdom Monastery in Middleton, which is basically Madison, Wisconsin. There are 3 of us here, and I know you have heard us tell various stories along the way. I'm basically going to talk more about our shared leadership model. Because we're already doing it. The sisters started a formal oblate program only in 1999. They had a couple oblates along the way, but they started a formal program in 1999. And from our very beginning, we have never had a sister be an oblate director. From our first oblate director was a spiritual director who was on staff at the monastery. She was a former sister from a different I don't even know.
BDM. She was a BDM.
Oh, okay. So she was our director for many years, and we started with 12 oblates. We have grown now to 200 oblates, whereas when we first started, everyone was around the monastery, or at least in Wisconsin. Now, if you look at the handout, we're like in 15 states. People have moved all over, and so some of our challenges are, how do you keep community when some of the people are close? Some of us, I'm part of Sunday Assembly, I sing in the choir, I'm there at the monastery a couple times a week, and some people come back once a year, or maybe only once every other year. And so when we make our promise, and I was delighted, Teresa, when you were talking about making the professed, because we actually make a promise. We make a promise to both the monastery, but we promise to journey with each other. And so from the very beginning, the sisters helped us create a community, that we were going to be community with each other. So when our spiritual director retired, for a very short period of time, we had a paid oblate director who was an oblate, but that was not financially sustainable. So since 2011, we have had, for all practical purposes, no oblate director, and we have a shared leadership model. So that's what I thought I would describe to you, because it perhaps is a unique model that you may be interested in. So if you look at the side of the handout that looks like 4 circles, we've always used a circle leadership model, but we've refined it in the last 5 years through some visioning processes that we have done. We have a leadership circle. We have a formation circle that does formation work with our candidates. We have a vision circle, and Marge, Chris, and I are all from the formation or the vision circle. And then we have another circle that is our program circle, and they oversee all the administration, registration, nitty-gritty work for our 5 retreats that we run a year. So much of what we do as oblates is 5 retreats, and then some of our oblates are in reflection circles that meet in between, small local reflection circles. We have 10 of those. But it has not been a requirement to be in a reflection circle, so some oblates are, some oblates are not. And we have some renewed energy right now coming out of Vision Circle to figure out how to communicate better and how to be community better, with us being spread all over the United States and doing this without a central person. You might also be interested that at the center of our circle, rather than a person then, is our mission, vision, values, and our aims for the year. And these are coordinated with the monastery. So our mission, which is actually on your handout, is...
We don't have it.
Oh, you don't have it. Well, okay. Well, I'll read it to you. The Oblates of Holy Wisdom Monastery are members of an intentional community rooted in Benedictine values who promise to journey with one another as we listen for God. And then our vision, so what we're continually striving to be, is we strive to become a transforming presence in the world by living a balanced life of prayer, reflection, work, and leisure. So that's my mind just went to all the hours of work we spent into distilling our mission and our vision into those 2 simple statements, and that's the kind of work that our Vision Circle does. So I'm also trying to think, what else might you like to know about us? And there's a couple other statistics in there. In 2013, 43% of us, of the 200, attended at least one retreat. So there's a lot of people kind of drifting off. I mean, on one hand, at least 43% got to a retreat. There's also some people drifting off there, out there. So I would say, if I were to look at some of the strengths of a shared leadership model, we get lots and lots of people involved. And it takes a lot of volunteers to pull something like this off. It means a lot of people have to step up to the plate. It takes some skill to organize all those people. It takes a lot of time, some people who have some commitment. And you also need to do it in a way that doesn't burn people out, that there's continually people have permission, and more than permission, they are celebrated, that it's okay to have a 3-year term, and you come in, and then you can gracefully go off. If you want to stay longer, you can, but it also means that even if I just look at the people who are nearby that can drive to the monastery and go to face-to-face meetings, and I know Chris zooms in. She's down in Illinois, so she zooms into our vision meetings. It's still, it's a commitment to do this shared leadership model. So, I'll also say that Vision Circle has been the one charged with writing our annual goals. So we have been working with actually a consultant who's a Dominican sister who has worked with our monastery for, I'm looking around, decades, who is talented and wise, and she has been working with us most recently to get all of us at the monastery writing goals for what we want to do for the next year. And when I say that, let me describe. When I talk about our monastery, we are an ecumenical monastery. They were the first women's community to move from being Roman Catholic to ecumenical. We now have 3 Roman Catholic sisters, 2 Protestant sisters. One is a Presbyterian minister. And they describe themselves in their mission as a community of communities. So the Oblates are only one of those communities. We have a community of several hundred people that's called the Friends of Wisdom Prairie. They have 100 acres that over the last 2 decades we have restored to native prairie. And if you ever come visit us, it's quite stunning what we've done. But that's one community. We have a very vibrant now Sunday assembly that welcomes everyone, and because we're now ecumenical, we can overtly at every service welcome everyone to the table openly and joyously.
Could you name those denominations again, please? Roman Catholic.
Well, Roman Catholic. One of the sisters is a Presbyterian minister, and to tell you the truth, I don't even know what the 5th sister is. You know, at some level, it's like I can't even tell you what percentage the Oblates are, because I'm sure it's in a file somewhere, but it's just not important to us. You know, it's like we're all Benedictines. You know, it's like we come together and there's just we just come together around the Rule of Benedict. It's just not important.
No, but I just would like
to... But of the sisters, yes.
No, I just wanted the denominations. Catholic, Presbyterian, and...
Episcopalian. My background is Methodist.
Methodist, okay.
We actually, there's another page to this handout. We have several of our community who identify as both Christian and Buddhist. Our last retreat was of a John McCransky, who has written books and is a Buddhist theologian, and we had this wonderful program that was comparing Benedictine spirituality with Tibetan meditation spirituality, and Sister Lynn helped facilitate it. It was just deep. It was wonderful.
Very ecumenical, so
we, if you ever come come visit us, we also have a value around inclusive language, which is a little disconcerting for some people when they first visit. We change everything, including the prayer of Jesus. So, but it's quite respectful and beautiful. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm Camille Wooden. I'm from St. Placid Priory in Lacey, Washington, which butts right up against Olympia. And in the interest of full disclosure, I'm the one with a lot more questions than answers. And so, and maybe it's okay that I'm going last, because I would say our community right now is at the foot of that mountain we talked about yesterday. St. Placid Priory has is a community of 9 finally professed sisters. There are 6 of us in formation. I was an oblate for, and I guess I still am. No one's been able to answer what happens when you then move into the religious life path. But we have actually a couple sisters who started as oblates at St. Placid. So our oblate community numbers 50 plus, with 35 people very active and reliably showing up at our monthly meetings. The oblate program started in 2000, which is not quite 20 years. But and I am currently co-director of Oblates with Sister Lucy Winku. And I think the thing that I see, and this is the mountain we're to climb, is 18 years has been long enough for things to become pretty settled. This is how we do things. Mm-hmm. The leadership has always been top down. A sister has always been the director. She sets up the, up until a couple years ago. Well, no, she still does set up the agenda for the year. A couple years ago, we did start having oblates as facilitators, but they facilitated the themes that were presented to them. So there is a comfort level both in the community of oblates and the community of sisters with how things are done. And so for myself, I feel the change coming, and it's that earthquake rumbling, it's the tremors underneath. We are growing. We have 5 candidates, and we typically have between 5 and 10 what we call guests, but I think other communities call inquirers. In the 2 weeks before I came here, I took 4 phone calls from people interested, and they had various issues around how they could associate with us, including distance and their time available, but they were really clear to me that they wanted community. They wanted to find a way to connect with Benedictine spirituality. And I promised I'd call them when I came home, and I better have some answers, or at least something to give them. So our community is growing. And what I feel is it's not going to be enough to do things the way we've done them. And one of the first things I'm going to move for is shared leadership. there's never been shared leadership. And so for Sister Lucy to have a co-director, myself, is kind of a big deal right there. But I think we need to push farther, and she's open to that. It's just a matter of how do we do that? And how do I present to, and after living in the monastery for 2 years, I think most of our sisters would be open, but not if I come in as a steamroller. Or, I've got all, I can just see me flying back and going, wait till you hear all the ideas I've got. Things can just, that's not going to work. And it probably shouldn't, actually. So here are some of the things that our Oblate community is talking about, the shared leadership. We would like to have a committee that does outreach. We have Oblates who now have to stay at home because of age or health issues. And how do we send them the emails, they're on my email list, that's not enough. And the community feels that's not enough. And we also have some Oblates who've dropped out of sight. And it may be that they moved away, and it may be something else. And how do we reach out to them again? So that's one of our priorities this year. We also have heard from our new Oblates that, I had a sister mentor and an Oblate mentor while I was a candidate, and then I became an Oblate, and boom, that's it. And so we're talking about mentoring now, and I've asked our new mentors to our new 5 candidates that they stay mentoring at least a year into their oblation, so that we don't just drop. And of course, after 20 years, you've got Oblates who, it's a warm community and a friendly one, but we get to the point where we just don't think what it is to be new, and how it feels to come into a community that's clearly been together forever and are comfortable with each other. And I think that we're feeling that sense of how do we draw everyone into this circle. My personal feeling, and this is just for me, is our meetings are locked down. There's this, then we go. There's 10 minutes for announcements. That's the only thing that's unscripted. There will be no time. We have an Oblate meeting the day after I get back. There will be no time for me to talk about this of any kind. And so my goal is we need to have time to process as a community. So that's something, now that's a personal goal. I don't know if anybody agrees with me, but this is one thing where I'm not sure I care. I'm going to just do it. Did I say that? I think I did. Another big goal, I think many of us have, though not everyone, because they don't see the importance of it yet, is connecting to other Oblate communities. Our older Oblates, that is the experienced Oblates, they have attended the NABOD functions, they have gone to events, and so they sort of feel like they got a feel for it. But we have a large group of people, say in the last 5 years, that's probably about half of our group almost, who have never been outside our community. They have no idea. And so we need to somehow, because it's inspiring. And that's what I'm hoping. It's been inspiring for me to go to events. It has grown me as a Benedictine and as an Oblate. And I want to bring that to our community. And the other issue we're tackling, and Sister Lucy and I are talking about this, is we do have people now requesting to be long-distance Oblates. And how do we manage that? We've never done that before. So I'm listening I know other communities do. We never have. But now we're getting the requests. This is an amazing time to be a Benedictine. It's just, honestly, we are ecumenical community. Our Oblate community is ecumenical co-ed. It's open to anyone with an interest in and a desire to commit to Benedictine spirituality. And then as far as the questions go, here are some of the issues, and I'm going to put them out there, and then somebody's going to grab me and say, let me tell you what we do about that, and I'll take home an answer. Here's the big one. This is absolutely, as far as I can tell, and I've been listening hard these last 2 years, almost all our Oblates are involved in a parish community, a parish or church community. And that's where they see doing their social justice work and their volunteer work. When they come to us, that's their oasis. That's their time out of that world and into a world where it's about their spirituality and their growth. And I can't argue with that. And so for many of them, they won't say no when we bring up an idea of a ministry or a mission of some kind, but they'll say, I do that at my church. And they're incredibly involved. So there's a culture that exists at St. Placid that may or may not, and I'm not sure now how open to change or how much change is possible. I think with some of our new people coming in, they will be. So the big one really is people's purpose for coming to, say, our monthly meetings. And mostly it is personal spirituality. And we do have local oblates. We have oblates that come from as far as maybe 2-3 hours away. We have an oblate up in Canada even, but he only comes a couple times a year because that's a tough trip. We have some come up from Vancouver, which is a couple hours drive. And we have quite a few in Seattle. So far enough away that they can't do volunteer work easily, but those that live locally do come and do volunteer work and have done for years. It tends to be things like running the store and, doing hospitality and, those kinds of things. But but we're not really a part of the sisters' mission. We're an urban priory, and we do have homeless come to the door, and they never are turned away. We have something to give, and the Oblates aren't any part of that right now. So there must be a way. So there are opportunities. Now that I've had a foot in both worlds, I know there's a way to bring us together. And then there's just the monastic culture itself, which, first of all, the sisters, understandably, their worry would be that the Oblates would just overrun the place, sort of an infestation of Oblates, and they're a little worried about that. So our job is to educate ourselves and immerse ourselves in the Benedictine way of life, so that they are reassured we make all decisions, all suggestions coming from that Benedictine immersion. And monastic culture also moves slowly. A decision can take months or longer. And so the patience to bring those two cultures together. I don't think this is going to be, I don't want to say it's not going to be easy. I think it's going to take time and patience and tact and diplomacy and incredible sensitivity to the needs of everyone. I have great hope that it can be done, but again, I have, at this moment, many more questions than I do answers. But I'm beginning to sense a direction and a first step. So I'm grateful to be here and sharing all of your wisdom, because I got a lot of notes and I'm taking them home with me. Thank you.
Okay, why don't, I think we've got some time for some questions, and again, because of our technological limitations, I will have people will either hand you the mic or if you can come up, but we've had some amazing examples of the creativity, of the depth of what's happening across our country with these communities of Oblates, and it's amazing, and I know people probably have comments or questions, so I was going to say, don't make a liar of me.
I just have a question.
Please.
I just have a question for Holly. Do you have Holly?
Mary.
Mary. Okay, Mary. Do you have websites for your different organizations?
Yeah, we do, but We have a beautiful monastery website. Our Oblate website is more of a closed website for ourselves. It's not very well used because it's kind of old and clunky, and Chris is working on it as we speak.
Yeah, would you come over here?
I just wanted to find out about how many oblates are involved in your circle of leadership and planning.
Oh boy, that's a good question.
I'm guessing there's 7 to 10 on each circle. And we just, and that fluctuates. People are coming and going. And I was going to say, if you go to the Holy Wisdom Monastery website, there are resources that you can go to for the Oblates that show our retreat schedule, our retreat leaders. There's open things, but then we also have a closed website. So I shouldn't say it's all closed. It's not all closed. There's lots of open things. Like we have things like, what is an oblate? How do I get more information? Yeah.
Will we be getting copies of the second page? Thank you.
Another technical glitch. So we get the second page. I didn't realize there was one. So.
And the shared leadership model, was that really a decision because you had nobody willing to be the oblate director, or was it a goal?
We've had a shared leadership model from the beginning. It's just been refined a lot in the last 10 years, and especially been refined in the last 5 years. After the paid director, we lost our paid director in 2011, we kind of floundered for a couple years, and then a couple of us just stepped up to the plate, and we really spent some time pulling this together. So I would say this is refined in the last 5 years, but we've always had a shared leadership model.
Camille, I was wondering how you involve oblates in more of the outside activities. I know that at our monastery we're often invited, our oblates, by our oblate director to participate, asking for people who are interested in going, such as to this symposium. And I rarely notice that there are I don't know if there are oblates going to all of them. I have attended a couple, but I think, I don't know, there's almost an atmosphere among oblates of, oh well, this is my level, and that's for somebody who wants something extra special or whatever. And it would be really good, I think, what you said about how important it is for us to go beyond that. I don't think I really had an idea of what it meant to be an oblate until I started doing that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to know how.
I can say that in general, the culture of our Oblates is not me. And so Sister Lucy has, I'm just going to be honest, I don't know what else to do, has tried really hard. I mean, she keeps Oblate events in front of our group. She asks for people to sign up. She, I try to go to things, I'll volunteer to drive, because that's often a problem for people. And it just is kind of a no. And again, my feeling isn't that people are uninterested or don't care. It's just that isn't why they're there. They're not there, they don't think, to become part of a wider community. And until you, as you said, it's the chicken or the egg. I mean, we got to get them there and they can see and then be inspired. And right now, it's really hard. The monastery will offer a scholarship. Tries to make it as easy as possible, and we cannot get the Oblates to volunteer. And so, and even so the first year I was co-director, I thought, okay, I'm going to get things going here. So we're going to rake leaves, because by golly, we have a lot of leaves, because we're in the middle of the trees. If you've ever been to St. Pleasant, we have leaves everywhere. And so raking leaves is a big deal. So I thought, well, let's get the Oblates together on a Saturday and we're going to rake leaves. We haven't done that. We've never done that. So the first thing I encountered when I approached, the sisters was, well, what Saturday? Because we have programs and it will be noisy if you're raking leaves. Well, what if we rake leaves real quietly? But so there was the sort of like what time of day, and we have to find out what programs are going on, and where will you be, and where will the rakes come from, and we don't have and I'm just telling the story because it is funny, and it's also sort of illustrative of what we kind of encounter. Wow. And to tell you the honest truth, that raking party never happened. I had to give up. And so it's both sides here. It's how do we take advantage of what I believe is an incredible resource in our Oblate community. We have incredible Oblates with talents and gifts and eagerness, and it's amazing. And we also have a community of incredible Benedictine sisters. And for the life of me, it's like, how are we going to blend this monastic? When are you going to rake the leaves, and how do we get the rakes to the Oblates? Wake up! You're part of a worldwide community here. Wow! And that's why I'm here, because darn it, I need an answer to that. Oh, and if you have any rakes, I'll take them home with me.
I think we have a new symbol for the challenges. So if anybody ever
or whatever, part of human nature is that everybody has barriers. So then we work from there and try to break down those barriers. So how can you do that in your community? And you have to know your community. You have to, open a discussion and say, well, let's talk about this and how can we break it down? And hopefully solve all your problems that way.
I was just going to ask Mary if participation in the various circles is an invitation or a volunteer effort.
We used to have a real formal discernment process, and we took time away from a retreat, and it was it was both. It was both lovely and very cumbersome, and we gave it up, and now people on the various circles invite people. And that has its strengths and its weaknesses, because we don't always know the newer oblates, and we're always saying, we want to get some, Benedict says, get the newer, the younger voices in, and so we're, it's always a challenge to invite people. So, we've been known to make an entire roster and sit down together, like on Vision Circle, and everybody will get together and say, this one's having health problems, this one, we don't know what's happening with this person, and we'll highlight people who might have gifts and talents for different circles, and we'll pass it off to the circles. But the circles are responsible for inviting their own members.
This is for the group to respond to. Okay, I'll be a little louder, sorry. I kind of see, I'm going to just make a quick comment and then ask for your responses to it. So when I sit and think about the profession of stability and the sense of community, those two terms, stability and community, I see them as being really neat on both sides, both the professed side and the oblate side, to be reframed and expanded. And here's what I mean. Both the professed and the oblates, we live in deserts. They're different deserts. We live in the world with its own hazards and challenges. And I think for me, what I look to the community professed for is almost to be Jedi Masters. In this sense, for me, stability comes not through a sense of place necessarily, a monastery or a sacred ground as beautiful as St. Gertrude's, but through the transmission, if you will, of a set of practices, like liturgy of the hours and centering prayer and Lectio. There's a way that both the professed, who are you've mastered these, as great spiritual athletes, but for us who are trying to kind of live in the tempest of the world, can find peace in the world, in our own deserts. I think that's the bridge between the two deserts. So I would like to hear a little bit more, maybe a bit future orientation on how, in the future, that transmission of these practices, these great practices that could bring purity of heart to us in the world. What are some visions for that? Sorry for the length of that.
It's a good
I have an
Yeah, thanks, Dan. And I agree. And here's, and this is just something I think about. I don't have an answer. Again, there's the part that's the personal spirituality, which is the prayer and the Lectio and those things. But your oblation is to a community. And what does that mean? And yes, a big part of that is joining in the life of your community. Like, we do have a handout for our oblates that has the psalms and the prayers and the times, and we do have oblates who try to keep those times in their lives. But what does it mean to be an oblate of St. Placid? And if what you want is instruction in those disciplines, you can get them in different places as well. What does it mean to be connected to a monastery? And again, I'm not sure that in the end I won't say, you're right, that really is it. And it, I'm just sort of wandering here, but I wonder, because I see in our oblates a sense of, this is about my personal spirituality. And I do like practicing Lectio here, and I do like learning about those practices. And then they go home. and hopefully we do talk about what are you taking home and how are you going to live this. That's what we do as Oblates. And at the same time, I'm not just an oblate, a generic oblate. I'm an oblate of St. Placid. So what is my commitment to that monastery? And I wonder about, and I understand stability is not just about place. I understand that. But if stability is whatever we want it to be, then what is it? And so I'm just throwing these out as questions. I don't have answers, but I think about it. Because sometimes it feels like we homogenize things to where they don't mean anything anymore, or nothing really. So those are the things I'm thinking about. And I'd love to keep having the conversation going, because I don't know, but I think about those things too.
And I think this will be the last question, then we'll take a break, okay?
The only thing I heard about money was you said about a paid leader. So I was just wondering how do the communities work with the Oblates as far as finances are concerned? Like who takes care of what? And if you need to rake the yard, do you tell them bring your own rake? And what do you do? So how do you handle it financially? I didn't hear anything about it.
I'll say this as succinctly as I can. Our sisters were in the middle of tearing down an old, drafty monastery that was built back in the 50s when they had envisioned, they came to Madison to have a girls' school. And they were in the middle of tearing it down and building a beautiful new, for a couple weeks it was the greenest building in the U.S. When the recession hit. And they lost an incredible amount of their investments. And then came out of it with a huge mortgage. So now we actually, the Oblates, we have we have a commitment to give money to. We have a dollar amount. We have a budget that we must. I mean, if we don't make it, if they don't kick us out, but that we have a projected goal that we give to the monastery, and if we don't make our goal, it literally comes out of the sisters' retirement fund. So it's a pretty dicey situation, and we talk about sustainability. You don't have, when you get our handouts, we have 4 aims for the coming year, and they'll probably move on. But 1 aim is spirituality, 1 is hospitality and community, 1 is just program administration, and the 4th one is sustainability and stewardship, and it's a very serious one for us.
Does that then become an exclusivity? If you can't afford it, you can't be an oblate?
No, and this is something that we talk about all the time. We have a scholarship fund, so no one is denied coming to retreats. However, we have one of our challenges is a lot of Oblates won't ask for scholarships. They will not come to a retreat because a retreat for a weekend is only $130, but they won't come because they don't have the money. On the other hand, a lot of Oblates, because we keep saying it over and over again, will take scholarships, but we also have many Oblates. It's just like running a parish or a small community. We have a lot of very generous Oblates. So we have all kinds of people doing donations.
Okay. Okay, what an incredibly rich, powerful presentations, examples, discussion. I think this has been wonderful. I also know people need a break. So why don't we say, well, I'm going to tell you 10 minutes, in which case it'll be 15. So and then just before, hang on. When you come back, if you can put your stuff on your chairs so that you have some room on your table, we're going to get creative next.
Oh boy.
Oh boy, yeah. Hope that's a good oh boy. So, yeah, take about 10 minutes.